friends, it's been 107 days in quarantine and I finally finished another book. Let's talk about it. So rating wise, I'm still trying to figure out how I want to rate books. Honestly, doing 5 out of 5 stars or 10 stars feels weird. But I would say this is probably a rent it from your local library. And it's called, I forgot to say the name. The book I read is My Name is Rapunzel by KC Hilton. It is a retelling on the very well known fairy tale of Rapunzel. And yeah, I would say that it's probably a rent it from your local library, but that's a good option for any book. And I really enjoyed, the author definitely took different elements and changed it, and I liked the concept that she did with it, and while being as unspoiler as possible, in this version Rapunzel is older. When you read the prologue, which I guess I'll just spoil the prologue a little bit because it's 2 pages, but she talks about trying to escape from her tower from this dragon, and you're like, oh, so there's stairs and stuff, or there's a way for you to get down. You're not just in your tower throwing your hair down. That's interesting. And she's talking about how, man, I really should have planned my escape better and tried to vary my routine so you wouldn't get suspicious. And I'm like, yeah, probably, since you're trying to flee from a dragon. And she talks about this person named Greta, and it's like, who's Greta? And she mentions that it's the first time she's tried to escape in 100 years, and she doesn't succeed in escaping. It cuts off, and she's like, I knew that he would never let me escape. And then it begins with the beginning of her story, and you're just like, whoa, wait, how are you 100 years old? And you're running pretty well for a 100-year-old, so you're definitely not like an elderly woman. And there's a dragon, and there's some woman named Greta. Is that the witch? So I was really intrigued with it. However, I feel like the book tied up some loose ends really, really nicely in the end, but they really should have been deliberated on a little bit more. And there was a couple scenes where I was like, yeah, I guess this is happening. And so I'd say it's a decent book. I enjoy reading it, but again, I haven't gotten to really read this past semester because nursing school. I also like books really, really easily, so I feel like if this was read by someone else, they might be like, oh, this solution at the end of the story was a little bit too convenient, but I think this is a fun read, and there were points where I had to stop and go and do stuff, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? And it does have a twist, a little bit of a twist. I wouldn't say that it's blow your mind huge. And I was kind of suspicious of it a quarter, midway through the book, and so I really enjoyed just the different liberties that the author took with it, and I think the author clearly had fun with it, and there's a bit of romance in it. So yeah, if you want another book to check out, My Name is Rapunzel by KC Hilton. And one of the things I liked about the cover design is that there is a dragon over her shoulders, and when you read the book, you kind of, looking back at it now, I can understand the symbolism behind it. And now I will go into the spoiler part of the book review, so if you want to read this book, take a pause, don't take a pause, I can't order you to do anything. And I'm going to talk about the things of the book that made me go, what? So, the reason why this book was a lent from your local library, I don't know necessarily if someone would want to spend money on it, is because of the loose ends. So Rapunzel, it starts in the 1700s, and she's getting proposed to, and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to marry the man I love, and it's her first kiss, and she has all this anxiety about it, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense for she's 18 at this point in the story, she's 17, about to be 18, and yeah, that makes sense, that part's all on par. And it cuts to her boyfriend Henry's perspective, and the comments he made, I was like, is he gonna be a bad guy in this story? And not really, no, because he gets killed, so he can't, well, not really, he doesn't get killed, you would think he's dead for part of the story. We'll get into that. So he's talking about how excited there's he's gonna have her first kiss, and she's gonna be his, and it's a little bit too possessive, and I was like, what? Is this a romantic thing of enjoying all the first together, or are you gonna be a problem? And then they're gonna go run away together because his mom and dad are the king and queen of some country, and they don't approve of them being together, so they're gonna run away. And this witch Greta is like, how dare you, you promised me you'd be with me forever. And Rapunzel's like, I think I promised you when I was 6, you're holding me to that? So then she attacks her, and she wakes up and Henry's gone, and then it fast forwards 10 years later, and she hasn't aged at all since her 18th birthday, and her parents are like, hey, what's up with that? And they confront the witch, and the witch says that her father has inherited this magical power, and it gets passed on through the female line, and so Rapunzel can never leave her. So her leaving and running away with her boyfriend would have gotten her not being able to have access to her magical power that's contained in her hair, and she also won't be, the witch will make sure that she doesn't have any biological children, because if she has a female child, the power will leave Rapunzel and pass on to the next generation. So we get a few time skips of her dealing with getting older and kind of just being completely isolated with her family, and she really does love her mom and her dad. And her mom dies and her dad dies, and she can't really fall in love because she's gonna get old eventually, and she can't have kids with a person, so she never feels like it's fair to talk to people. And I got the sense of the book that she really didn't have a ton of friends to begin with, so it just puts her into this further depth of isolation. And eventually her father's like, oh, there's like this castle that my family owned, or it's like a really big mansion, and I want you to move there. The caretakers have been there for generations. They'll look after you. They'll keep the secret. And you're going to move in with the witch Greta. And she's going to take care of you. And the reason why he arranges that is because he is hoping that Greta will heal Rapunzel and undo the curse. And Rapunzel's like, I don't really want to, but I love my father, and maybe it'll get reversed. Greta never willingly reverses this curse for most of the book. And so then we get fast forward to the present day, and she is just, I think it was interesting listening to her talk about like how technology was kind of a mix between things she liked and things she didn't like, and you also get flashbacks throughout the story, and her talking about how Greta brought them into the future and bringing electricity and running water, and how much she hates it, and she doesn't really she likes her computer and stuff because now she can interact with people again online, because she can really only go into town for a small chunk of time every 50 years, and she has to wait for occupants for her to like leave people's memories, so they're not like, hey, you've been coming into town every day for 50 years and you have yet to age. And she's almost been burned alive before, and they managed to dissuade the crowd and be like, oh no, we're just harmless women living in this big mansion. No need to be suspicious of witchery. So she appreciates talking to people online and making friendships that way, or semi-friendships, but for the most part she doesn't really like technology, because with everything everything that's out of control in her life, because she can't get married, the love of her life is dead, she's stuck with the person who is the perpetrator of her torture, and so technology is kind of ripping away control from her, because it rips away the life she used to have and the comforts and the things that she's used to. So I can really understand like why I might be resistant to getting new technology when that's like the only thing that's familiar to me anymore now that everyone I love is gone. And I do like how, I thought it was interesting with the dragon, initially you're like, oh, this is Greta's pet that's gonna roast her alive, and the dragon finds a way to the mansion, and Rapunzel eventually realizes that like he's there to protect her, and Greta really doesn't like the dragon for some reason. There's also a point where she ends up adopting a son out of the caretakers, and that's really sweet and sad, but also that's an example of one of the loose ends that was kind of confusing to me. So her adopted son Luke, who she ends up raising, he eventually goes out and gets married. He meets a girl, they get engaged, and like Rapunzel's really nervous about it, because she's like, okay, Luke understands that things had been kept a secret. How well is his girlfriend Anastasia gonna understand this? And she finds out during the first time meeting her that they've been dating for longer than Luke said, and that they're gonna get married, and she's like, what is happening? And so then she moves in, and and she just gets these really bad vibes from Anastasia, and Anastasia reveals that she's pregnant, and Rapunzel's really excited because she's thinking like, oh, like I'll get to have grandchildren, and the grandchildren's grandchildren, and she's a little bit nervous about how they'll feel about her and keeping the secret, but she likes the idea of not being alone anymore, and so she agrees to let Anastasia run the household. She'll step back and she's like, no one can know about me, and I need unlimited access to the children, and she's like, no, you get reasonable access, and she's like, okay. And then one day she wakes up and her son and his wife are on fire. So they're both dead, they perished, and then she finds out from the firefighters, or like, I don't know if they had firefighters at this point in time, but that she wasn't ever pregnant. She lied about it, and they were like, oh yeah, judging from the state of her body, she probably couldn't get pregnant, so, like, how did you figure that out? Was there like an autopsy done, or were they just like, yeah, no, that uterus it's not good, and so she accuses Greta of killing her kids, killing her son and her daughter-in-law, and she was like, one day I will figure out a way to get rid of you, don't speak to me. And she doesn't speak to her for like decades, until like Greta like brings workmen in to put in new technology, and then she snaps and like talks to her. But I thought that like Anastasia would be so much more dangerous, and she's hinted at being more dangerous, but it felt kind of anticlimactic to realize the reason why Rapunzel looks at her with regret and looks at giving her permission to do stuff with regret is because like Luke died trying to shield her from being set on fire by something. And so I was like, I feel like I was thinking that like a mob was gonna come, or like you were gonna lose your son, he was gonna turn against you, or some more drawn out narrative, but she's gone pretty quickly. And then in modern day, Rapunzel reads this newspaper, and it's just by some guy who's like talking about fairy tales are just for kids, they're not for adults, and she snaps because he mentions Rapunzel, and she writes to him and she's like, I do exist and here's my story, and he's ends back being like, okay, this is a weird way to ask for a job, but you're a really good storyteller, do you want to pass my manuscript? And she's like, no, this is really what happened to me. And I'm like, why are you saying this, Rapunzel? Like, is this you just thinking it'll be privately said to one person? Are you snapping? Do you not care anymore? It just feels so dumb, especially when she's worked so hard and had to work so hard to be kept a secret and live in so much isolation, and then she's just there being like, here's my real story, I am an immortal person who's been alive for 250 years. And maybe it's just her snapping or rebelling in some way and not caring anymore, or just finally being worn down, but it just felt so stupidly reckless. And she ends up meeting the guy and talking to her, and they fall in love very quickly, like over the course of a couple weeks, and they're gonna run away together. And I was like, well, what is happening with this? It's like, I guess it makes sense. You know, this is the first guy she's talked to that isn't her son, that she's wanted to interact with, and I could see the allure, and she's been trapped in her situation, and it is kind of built up or talked about how she wants, and she does try to run away at one point. She wants to get away. She thinks about it. It has times where she's built up all this like, you know, maybe I should just do it. Maybe I should just run away and be away from her. And so I guess that kind of makes sense, but it just seems like kind of fast. Also, her hair can't be cut, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing, so she talks about how it's easier for her to go out during winter when she can hide her hair. But she's meeting this guy John and other people in the summertime. What is happening with her hair? Because I imagined that it was something like Tangled, where it's like really, really, really long, but it doesn't seem at times where it's that problem. So I feel like the author might have just like kind of forgot that like the hair is supposed to be abnormal-ish long, so like she can't just like put it up in a hairstyle and it'd be okay. Like there should be like, hey, you've got like ridiculously long hair, what is up with that? And so then you also find out that Henry is alive, and he's the dragon, and his thing, he's like got a reverse Medusa thing going on. Whenever Rapunzel looks at him, he turns into a dragon. So he's never been able to reveal his true form to her because when she looks at him, he turns into a dragon. And so she finally sees him. Like she's keeps seeing like this strange guy watching her on a hill, and she eventually confronts him, which leads to the most hilarious interaction ever because he has to have his face over his hands over his eyes because he can't look at her. Otherwise he'll turn into a dragon. So she's like, and he's like whimpering. That's what it says in the story, he's whimpering. So he's just there being like, no, I can't look at you. And she's like, please, babe, just I haven't seen your face in 250 years. Let me look at your face. He's like, no, I can't. I'll change into the beast. Like, just say the dragon. Explain yourself. And there would be so much less confusion in this scene. It's a little bit hilarious because he's just going on about it. And she's like, what are you talking about? And then eventually, like, she sees him or they kiss or something and she sees his face. He turns into a dragon and she's like, oh, that kind of makes sense. I guess that explains why Greta hates you so much, and why you've tried to kill her. And then she's like, okay, I can't run away with John, you're still here. And so, the other thing you learn from Henry, when it switches to his perspective, is that he's been trying to kill Greta for quite some time. He's really wanted to kill her. And there was one point where he thought there was a person that was Greta, and so he blew fire at her, but it wasn't Greta, it was Anastasia. So he killed Luke and Anastasia by accident. But that's what happened, and I didn't know how that was going to get confronted in the story. And so Rapunzel ends up having this really big showdown. Like, she goes to meet John, and he's like, why are you in a wedding dress? And she's like, that's an issue, coping mechanism I don't want to address at the moment. So she's trying to get him to leave, and Greta sees her with John. And she's like, you're trying to leave again? All right, time for, like, punishment round 2. And so there's a fight that happens. Henry comes, like, Greta gets attacked, or, oh, no, she gets shot. Like, there's another side character that got introduced early in the novel, and it turns out, like, he knew Greta, and so there's this confrontation that happens. And I was like, this seems a little bit convenient, but I'll roll with it. And as she lay there bleeding from her gunshot wound, John is like, just do the right thing for once in your life and reverse the curse, like let Henry not be a dragon, whatever. And so he ends up, somehow that phrasing makes it so that he switches places, so now he's a dragon, and Henry is perfectly human and can look at Rapunzel again. Though I feel like that's not as inconveniencing for John, because like it's said that like when Rapunzel looks at him, he turns into a dragon. So I wonder if like, it seems like there's a pretty good control on it. So all he has to do is like not be near Rapunzel, which he's already given her up emotionally because she's like, I can't be with you, I know Henry's still around. And so he's like, okay, like steps back. So now you just get to be a dragon whenever you want, and you just gotta avoid one person on the planet so you don't accidentally transform. That's like pretty awesome in my book. But I love dragons, so you know, it'd be fun to be able to fly around the country, no airline ticket fees. So then Henry is human again, and he's like, I need to tell you something. I killed your son. It was me. And actually, I think Rapunzel also figures that out. And she's like, oh. And he's like, I'm so sorry. And she's like, I'm so angry. And he's like, I know. And she's like, that you've been living with that burden. Girl, what? Like, she just forgives him instantly, being like, yeah, that's horrible that you've been living with that burden of the guilt this whole, like, no, maybe be a little bit like angry or upset because like he killed your son accidentally, like it was an accidental death, it was never intentional, but like it just felt like she, like, it was so resolved, and it was at the end of the book, so I guess the author was trying to wrap things up pretty quickly. But that's just an example of, I was like, that your grief process was very quickly, because you swore to destroy Greta for what she did. Maybe like have a little bit of that anger transfer over to Henry. Yeah, I enjoyed the read. I really like fairy tales. I love seeing new takes on fairy tales. So while I do think there's some plots of some ends of the story that just got like tied up neatly by a bow that maybe deserved a little bit more time or reflection on it, I think it's still a fun read, and it's also kind of a funny read too, when you're just thinking about how Henry has to cover his face, or it's like, what do you mean you just instantly forgave him? So overall, it was an enjoyable book, And that's all I have to say for now, and I will see you next time. Bye!